Summary. Progress through the water-filled region is difficult, for many different reasons. Chapter 12, Shoreline. Hunter wasn't too sure how he felt about the new region. On the one hand, it was aesthetically pleasing, which was always a plus, and there weren't too many predators yet. On the other hand, there was a shit ton of water, meaning he would have to do a lot more swimming. Oh well, at least it's better than diving, he thought as he paddled towards the platform sticking out of the water in front of them. Luckily, Survivor was too distracted looking around the pretty region and ought to be scared of the deep water they were currently swimming through. Hunter didn't have a particular fear of water. Sure, he hated being wet, but many creatures with a fur coat would agree with that sentiment. However, when he glanced down and saw nothing but darkness far below them, he shuddered at the thought of what could theoretically lurk in the depths. Suddenly, something bumped into Hunter, not hard enough to really push him, but hard enough that he noticed it. What the hell was that? Survivors seemed to have paid more attention to their immediate surroundings. Sensing Hunter's confusion, he pointed at something ahead of them. Hunter squinted his eyes, seeing one of those odd aquatic creatures leap in and out of the water in front of them. He huffed and kept swimming, not wanting to waste any more energy on the stupid fish. That plan was quickly thrown out the window, as right as he turned his back, the creature bumped into him again. "Hey!" Hunter shouted in surprise as it sped off once again. Was it trying to knock them off course or something? Hunter kept trying to simply ignore its pushes, but after the fifth time, Hunter growled in anger. Enough of this. He stopped, floating idly in the water and waiting for the fish to come back again. When it did come back for another, playful, push, he reached out to grab onto the fish in frustration, laughing triumphantly when his paws found grip. Gotcha! He could have sworn the fish's eyes widened as it suddenly sped off, with Hunter and Survivor in tow. Survivor almost lost his grip due to the speeds they were suddenly propelled through the water at. Hunter grunted as he tightened his grip. He definitely hadn't expected the fish to react this way. Neither had Survivor, judging by his frightened yelp. Hunter quickly found the fish was surprisingly easy to steer. All he had to do was aim it in the direction they wanted to go. He smirked as he aimed the fish towards the platform, deciding to use this to his and Survivor's advantage. Within moments of grabbing onto the fish, the duo were suddenly standing on the platform, having used the fish's momentum through the water to jump all the way up. Survivor got off Hunter's back and settled on the ground. He turned towards the horizon and chirped happily, enjoying the view. Hunter wanted to join his mate, but he had something else to take care of first. Grabbing a nearby spear, Hunter got on his knees and pinned the struggling fish to the ground. Survivor had gotten his fill of the blue seed fruit, but Hunter was still hungry and needed fresh meat. He stabbed down into the fish's head, and its struggling ceased immediately. He placed the spear on the ground and leaned down to feast. The meat was sinewy and full of muscle. It wasn't too bad, but Hunter definitely preferred the taste of lizard. Hunter eventually wiped his mouth, having eaten all that was edible on the fish. It wasn't as filling a meal as a dead lizard, but it would do for now. Licking the blood from his nose, he picked up the corpse of the fish and threw it into the waters below. He took a moment to watch the lifeless body sink, eventually disappearing in the deep darkness. He shuddered again, deciding that he didn't want to look at the black void that was at the bottom of the sea. Instead, he turned around and walked over to Survivor, sitting down beside him. Survivor glanced at Hunter before looking back to the horizon, only to do a double take and turn back to look at him. Hunter looked over confusedly as Survivor stared at him intently with an unreadable expression on his face. "Do I have something on my face?" Hunter thought, tilting his head at Survivor and letting out a confused mewl. Suddenly, Survivor leaned close and started licking vigorously at his blood-stained face. Hunter sputtered indignantly and tried to lean out of Survivor's reach, only for his mate to decide to pounce on him, pinning him to the ground to keep licking. Hunter huffed and stayed still. There was no point in struggling, he supposed. Survivor eventually stopped grooming his face, seeming satisfied with his work. He moved on to cleaning the fresh blood from his arms and paws. Hunter purred, thankful for his mate's cleaning efforts. After a while, Survivor deemed him clean enough and stopped grooming. He nuzzled up to his side and purred. "You really should try to eat your meat less like a barbarian, you know, You'd end up less of a bloody mess that way," he said, matter-of-factly. "Barbarian." Hunter squawked indignantly, offended by the comment. He sputtered for a moment before grumbling and resting his head on Survivor's. "It's not easy to eat meat without a mess, you know." Survivor laughed. It was light-hearted and happy. The sound made Hunter's heart jump in his chest, and he smiled before licking his mate on the cheek. Survivor chirped happily and licked him back. They stayed cuddled together on the platform for a while until the forming clouds eventually spurred them on to find a shelter. Going down a pipe, they entered a few more water-filled rooms. Luckily, none of them required any diving to get through. In one room, Hunter spotted another one of the weird fish and attempted a couple times to catch the fast bugger, but it was unfortunately too smart to get caught and avoided Hunter like the plague. Survivor found the entire situation very funny, and Hunter eventually decided to give up the chase to avoid more embarrassment. Eventually, climbing up a pole took them to a pipe leading into a shelter. Just as the ground started shaking, Hunter slid in and placed Survivor on the floor. The familiar sound of the shelter doors closing behind them sounded as Hunter decided it was Survivor's turn to be groomed. Survivor's fur wasn't completely covered in blood like his often was, but it was a bit matted, and there were some knots in the fur he got to work on straightening out. It took a bit of time, but eventually Hunter felt satisfied with his work. His eyes landed on the wrapping around Survivor's torso. "I should probably make sure the wound is cleaned properly." His mate followed his gaze and understood what he wanted to do. Survivor gulped but ultimately nodded. Hunter purred reassuringly as he carefully undid the red bandage. It fell away surprisingly easily, having come loose after their various escapades. The wound was looking even better than it had previously, having almost completely healed over. Granted, it would leave a nasty-looking scar, but Survivor should be able to walk on his own next cycle, Hunter reckoned. Carefully, he dragged his tongue through the fur that surrounded the wound, covered in dried blood. Survivor tensed slightly but didn't flinch away. Hunter made sure to be incredibly gentle, keeping an eye on Survivor's body language to ensure he wasn't hurting his mate. After a while, the dried blood on Survivor's fur was cleaned away, returning to its white color. Hunter decided to discard the piece of fabric. It wouldn't be needed next cycle when Survivor's wound was healed anyway. Survivor chittered gratefully before yawning loudly, with Hunter doing the same. It was about time to get some sleep. If they made good progress the next cycle and nothing else went wrong, they might make it to Looks to the Moon with no further hiccups. Hunter cuddled close to Survivor to fight off the suffocating cold of his wet fur, and he purred. "Sleep well, Survivor." His mate purred back, responding drowsily. "Good night, Hunter." The next cycle, Survivor was really happy to find he could finally stand, walk, and run on his own, although with slight difficulty and a little pain. As soon as he was able to get to his feet and walk, without Hunter's help, he chirped happily. He started jogging around Hunter, who was sitting in the middle of the shelter, laughing at his antics. As soon as the shelter door opened, the slugcats left the shelter and started moving through the tunnels in the general direction of the collapsed superstructure they spotted earlier. The tunnels luckily weren't flooded enough to force the slugcats to go through more diving. Survivor sighed in relief at this. Swimming through the very deep sea, looking down to see the blackness of the depths staring back, was scary enough for him. There weren't any predators around, which was good on one hand, but on the other, Hunter needed to eat. All they could find that could be considered predatorial were some blue leeches underneath a pole that tried to pull them under the water to drown. Survivor asked him if they counted as edible meat, but Hunter reckoned they wouldn't make for a very good meal, even if he found a way to catch and eat them safely. Eventually they reached a junction with 3 different poles they could choose from. In the corner of the room lay a few blue water seeds, which Survivor popped and ate in the small pools of water present in the room. After some consideration, they decided to go up the poles in order from the side they came in. Having made their choice, they climbed through the leftmost one. The pole that would have led them upwards, presumably out of the tunnels and back to the surface, had broken off. Hunter reckoned he would have to jump off the walls and told Survivor to clamber onto him and hold on tight. He sighed. He'd just gotten his ability to walk back, and now he had to become a glorified backpack again? Resigned, He climbed onto the red slugcat's back as he started jumping upwards. "You have to teach me how to do this myself at some point," Survivor said, still awed by Hunter effortlessly scaling the walls. Hunter chuckled in response. "I promise I'll teach you someday," Survivor chirped happily. Someday, when his mate was cured, he wanted to learn everything he knew. In return, Survivor would teach him everything he knew back. But that was for the future, when everything had been worked out. Once again, they reached the surface, and Survivor was startled as he finally spotted a predator. There was a unique type of lizard, one he'd never seen before, on the edge of the water next to them. It was white, with dark pink gills and tail frills of varying lengths. Survivor glanced over at Hunter, who seemed distracted, looking the other way. Survivor gave him a light tap, making him turn around, and then pointed at the lizard. Hunter's eyes widened slightly, and he nodded, creeping forward with Survivor close behind. The lizard seemed to be enjoying the warm air, having its back turned to the slugcats and staying completely still. As he approached, Hunter picked one of the many spears off the ground, twirling it around in his paw and testing the weight of it. Once he got close enough, he stabbed the lizard through its soft back. The creature barely had time to flinch before it was slain, only requiring a couple stabs with the spear. As Hunter dug into his meal, Survivor selected a spear off the ground, fidgeting with it while he waited. Looking at his mate, he noticed Hunter trying his best to eat carefully so as not to cover himself in blood. He watched, amused, as Hunter attempted to tear pieces of meat off the lizard while at the same time trying to avoid the worst of the blood spurts. It seemed he had taken Survivor's earlier advice to eat more carefully to heart, and the white slugcat had to respect his commitment. However, eating raw meat while avoiding a mess seemed to be an impossible endeavor. The end result of his attempt was marginally better than other times, when he'd tear into the flesh with reckless abandon, but not by much. Once he was finished, he looked down at the blood covering him, sighed, and turned towards Survivor, who was stifling a laugh. "Not a word," Hunter said, trying to stay serious, though he was also close to breaking out in a laugh. Before Survivor could say anything else, they heard the flap of wings along with the sound of steam releasing from above. Survivor stilled and glanced up, seeing a green vulture mask staring into his soul as the winged creature descended quickly towards them. He was suddenly pulled by his paw into the water. He started swimming backwards, trying to make distance from the predator, with Hunter doing the same next to him. The vulture kept its soulless eyes trained on the slugcats as it flew down to the surface of the water, hovering slightly above them. Its head shook, and Survivor knew from experience that this meant they were going for a bite. With a hiss, he raised the spear in his hand. He could see Hunter do the same in his peripheral vision. The vulture suddenly lunged forward, attempting to grab one of the slugcats with its powerful beak. Their spears flew, one hitting the vulture in its long neck and the other hitting its left wing. It fell limp for a short moment, almost crashing into the water, before regaining its composure and flying into the air. It seemed a bit more wary now, but it was still staring at the duo as they were trying to swim back and away from the flying predator. Hunter growled angrily, swapping places with Survivor and protectively covering him with his own body. He narrowed his eyes, reached for his back, pulled the explosive spear out, and used the tip to point towards the vulture. A silent but effective threat. The vulture stared for a moment longer before finally deciding it didn't want to go through the effort of catching prey that could fight back. Instead, it flew back to the island with the dead lizard. It snapped its jaws around the neck of the corpse, picking it up like it weighed nothing, before flying off with a single, powerful flap of its massive wings. Hunter and Survivor stayed where they were for a moment, watching the spot where the vulture had been, slightly in shock. They exchanged a knowing glance after a while, deciding it would probably be best to get a move on. Hunter put away the explosive spear, turned around, and started swimming. Survivor followed closely behind. More water, blue leeches, and fast fish followed. Survivor was already getting plenty sick of the region and all its water. The novelty of the beautiful area was quickly wearing off. Luckily, they had managed to get a hold of another one of those fast fish, which saved them the annoyance of swimming anywhere. Survivor noted that the fast fish could also fly through the air effectively through a jet of water it shot behind itself. Such an odd creature, wonder what it should be called. A fish that shoots jets of water, a water-jetting fish. How about? As they zipped into a pipe, past a kelp-like plant that seemed to be trying to grab at them, Survivor figured out a name and blurted it out. Jetfish. Hunter turned and looked at him quizzically. He looked back and smiled. A name for these little guys, Survivor explained, patting the fish they were riding on its back. Pretty good, huh? Hunter smiled, making a note that naming things on the fly seemed to be a recurring occurrence in his mate's colony. Sure, that works. They were coming up on looks to the moon's structure now, and Survivor could feel anxiousness rise up in his stomach at the thought of them arriving too late. Or was it anxiety at being in such an open stretch of water? He looked ahead. The structure was close but still a bit of distance away, and he could tell the water below them was incredibly deep at this point. He glanced at Hunter, holding onto the jetfish next to him. He was staring straight ahead at the superstructure. This was it, his mate's delivery mission was almost complete, and then they could focus on finding a way to cure Hunter. It wouldn't be easy, with no current leads or clues, but they would figure something out. Hunter seemed to have some good cycles and some bad cycles, completely randomly. In some cycles, his symptoms seemed extra bad and painful, while in some of his better cycles, the only sign of his sickness was his wheezy breath and sunken-in, foggy eyes. Survivor opened his mouth to ask how Hunter was doing when a loud vibration suddenly shook the water. For one moment, he thought it was an early warning of the rain starting, but it hadn't felt the same. The vibration had been shorter, and there had been no real rumbling associated with it, like there always was. His mate had also felt it, glancing around worriedly. Swallowing, Survivor got a really bad feeling. Please don't be something in the water, he thought as he slowly glanced behind them. His heart nearly leaped out of his chest, and he screamed in terror as he saw a giant creature trying to catch up to them. It seemed to be biomechanical, most of its body organic, but its mouth seemed to be more mechanically made, a hydraulic press of metal rods and large grooves, no doubt allowing them to effectively clamp down on prey. Worst of all, it was absolutely massive, dwarfing the two slugcats with ease. Hunter, upon hearing his mate's terrified screams, whipped his head around, his eyes widening when he spotted the huge creature. "You have got to be kidding me!" he screamed, tightening his grip on the jetfish and shaking it slightly, as if it would make it propel through the water faster. Survivor whimpered as the giant predator's jaws creaked open, preparing to crush them to pieces. "Hunter, it's gaining on us," he said, his voice quiet and terrified. "Hunter? I hear you," Hunter responded, gritting his teeth in concentration. Looks to the moon's superstructure was so close, an outstretched platform only a ways ahead of their location. Come on, come on." Survivor heard the red slugcat mumble under his breath, panic building in his voice. The massive creature was almost upon them now, just a moment longer, and it would clamp down on all three of them. Survivor shut his eyes tight as its hydraulic mouth started vibrating, no doubt preparing to close. Suddenly, just as he prepared for the cycle to end in death, he felt himself fly out of the water and soar through the air. He opened his eyes just in time to see the ground steadily approaching, giving him a short window to brace for impact before landing hard on the ground. A huge wave of water washed over Survivor as he lay on the platform, trying to catch his breath. Hunter came running, entering his vision. He crouched down and checked Survivor over for any injuries. Finding none, he sighed in relief and helped Survivor to his feet. Once they were standing, Hunter pulled him into a tight embrace. "You're okay, thank the stars," Hunter mumbled into his shoulder. "That was way too close," he whispered, sounding close to tears. Survivor purred and wrapped his arms around him. "Yeah, but we made it." Hunter laughed wetly, pulling away from the hug. Survivor reached up a paw and wiped away a couple of the tears flowing down his face, shushing his sobbing mate, reassuring him that he was okay, that he wasn't leaving his side. Once Hunter had calmed down, they kept moving forward. Sliding through the pipe, the slugcats arrived inside the structure. Paw in paw, they explored the inside. The place was, to put it lightly, a complete mess. There were holes in the walls, broken off poles all over the place, and, of course, water absolutely everywhere. At the end of the long horizontal pole Survivor and Hunter were shimmying on, there was another pipe. This surely has to be the last one, Hunter thought, huffing slightly in frustration at the fact they still had to deal with swimming and platforming after the incident with the horrifying water creature back there. The terror he felt when Survivor lost grip on the jetfish and flew through the air rivaled the terror he felt over the dropwig incident a few cycles ago. He had thought Survivor had fallen back into the water, into the giant water creature's jaws. The relief he felt when he saw Survivor alive and well made him shed tears. Hunter growled tiredly. He was so done with this cycle, he wanted to find a shelter, snuggle up close to his mate, and sleep. His mate squeezed his paw reassuringly, and he calmed down. Passing through the pipe, they crawled through another tunnel, not filled with water, thank the stars, and finally reached a high ledge. Hunter peered down, noticing a small tunnel on the other side of the room, slightly submerged in water but not deep enough to require a dive. Looking back at Survivor, they exchanged a nod before jumping into the waters below. The water was noticeably warmer here than Hunter had ever experienced in other regions. It was still cold but warmer. Passing through the tunnel, they finally reached their destination. Hunter and Survivor stepped onto a small space of dry land before the room and peered in. In the middle of the submerged room sat an island, and on top of the island lay a lifeless figure. After a while, Survivor spoke. Is that? Hunter nodded with a grunt. Looks to the moon. He closed his eyes, shook for a moment, and spat out the object of his delivery. As soon as the green neuron flew from his stomach and landed in his paw, it flew towards the incapacitated figure and hovered above them for a moment before flying down and colliding with them with an odd sound as sparks flew. The green fly turned white as the whole structure started shaking violently. Survivor yelped and almost fell over, but Hunter steadied him from the side before he could fall over. The figure suddenly moved, the odd mechanical arm connected to them lifted them upwards as Survivor and Hunter suddenly felt weightless and floated. The arm moved the figure to the middle of the island and placed them down gently. The slugcat stopped floating and landed back on solid ground. Odd blue text appeared on the wall, blinking a few times before turning red. Four more white neuron flies suddenly floated out of several areas in the room and joined the first in hovering above looks to the moon. After a moment, they all sparked in turn and made the same odd noise the green neuron fly had made upon revival. The figure sat up, shaking for a moment with its eyes closed. It stopped, everything turning deathly silent and still for a moment, before slowly opening its eyes. Hunter's ears twitched as a slightly distorted, robotic voice was suddenly heard. Hello.